Hey everybody, and welcome to the show. Hope you're all doing well. I just want to kick off the show by giving a shout out to my show sponsors, Beast of Book Nutrition, for providing me with some awesome training gear and keeping me topped up with the supplements. Go check them out on Amazon. They've just slashed their prices on their creatine, ZMA, and pre-workout. If you use the promo code BEASTBULK10 at the checkout, you'll receive a further 10% discount off their supplements, courtesy of this podcast. So, here with me today, you heard him last time. He's back again. He's that much of a good guest. I needed to get him back. Rick, how you doing?
Hey, great, Richard. How are you doing?
I'm very good, thank you. So I want to actually start off by saying congratulations on the race. So it was probably a few days after we did the podcast. You went for a 50 miler. How do you pronounce that race? So I don't want to mess it up.
I'm not sure myself. It's the first time I've done it, and I've never heard anyone actually say the word. It's in a different state than I live in, but I'll take a stab at it. I think it's Tuscazor.
I was going to say
50.
that.
Yeah,
So
I think
I'm glad you said
that's
the
just
same
my
thing.
guess. That's just my guess. But yeah.
So you did a 50 miler and you came first in your age category. So congratulations on that. How did that race go for you? Was it everything go to plan or?
Yeah, it went very smoothly. I was surprised how smoothly it went. These things are half logistics. You really had to do a lot of planning because you have to have the right supplement or gel or drink at the right time. And so they allowed you to use a thing called a drop bag. And so, I tried to figure out what I would need at the certain stage of the race. And anyway, it worked out. And I ran it was a 2-loop course, each loop being, of course, 25 miles. And I did the first loop in 5 hours and 20 minutes and the second loop in 5 hours, 23. So I only slowed down 3 minutes, and that was probably the best pacing I've ever had for a race because I normally slow down quite a bit in the second half. So I was really pleased about that, and it was a beautiful day and just great to be out among the running community again, after lockdown with COVID. So it was just a great time.
Yeah, sounds awesome. That like how you said there, 3 minutes difference in the two laps. That is some good pacing. I've not done any kind of distance like this before. So for you to say like you did 50 miles, to me sounds crazy. So what I do want to get into as we go along this show is I want to talk more this time about how you prepare for something like that. I've actually got a friend who's preparing for a 50K race.
Okay.
And I want to just talk about, where you actually begin. And I can't even comprehend doing them kinds of miles. I've done probably 10 miles in the past, and that killed me. I always stay to about 3 to 5 miles, and that's my little run. I don't look at it like I'm going to do this as something of a profession, let's say, but or even a hobby. It's more to sort of keep fit. As we spoke about in the last podcast, it's really good for your mind and stuff. But what I want to do before we actually get back to that, because I'm thinking people might not have heard the last podcast. Some people might have just tuned into this one. So I want to just recap quickly, tell the listeners about your story before we start going into the diet, nutrition, and some of the things you've achieved.
Okay.
So obviously, we spent a good portion of time speaking about that, and it's not going to be easy to just put it into a nutshell, but I'll hand over to you if that's all right with you to just kind of explain that. And sorry if that's putting you on the spot.
Okay. Well, I see. I thought you were going to do this, but no, I'm just kidding.
I don't want to muck it up.
All right. I'll try to do it quickly. Coming into midlife, I was overweight, out of shape, a real mess. I couldn't run more than a lap around a track. So I went and got my annual physical at age 50. And long story short, it was discovered that I had 60 to 80% blockage in both of my carotid arteries. And it was a real shock, obviously. So I started researching how to address this particular disease. And so what I had, my research conflicted with the first cardiologist that I visited. He basically said to take meds and you'll need a procedure in a couple years, and just
don't mess it up.
Don't
Yeah, I
screw
remember
it
that.
up. Don't screw it up by trying to do anything different than what I tell you to do. That was his attitude. So I dropped him like a hot potato. And it was a wild coincidence, but I got a very good cardiologist. The coincidence was that his son was dating my daughter, and that's how I got in with him, because he wasn't normally taking patients. So anyway, I changed my diet radically. I would say initially my diet was pretty much a vegan diet. I was following the advice of a cardiologist on the west coast of the U.S. His name was Dean Ornish. He had written a book about reversing heart disease, but it applies also to carotid arteries. And so his program was essentially a vegan diet with stress reduction and an exercise program. So I followed the diet. I started taking yoga, and I joined a hiking club. So I was trying to reduce my stress and also start to exercise more, because I really wasn't doing much exercise. So in combination with all those three things, essentially I ended up reversing my blockage. That's the long story short. I would get scanned every so often, and the scans just kept coming back better and better. I lost weight. I got back into running, kind of transitioned from hiking and back into running, because I was a runner when I was younger. And then I started running. I ran a marathon, first time ever, and did well. Then I tried to get into Boston, and that I fell short. I actually beat my cutoff time of 3 hours and 40 minutes for my age group, but I wasn't far enough under that time to get invited. So
it's a phenomenal time, and that's a massive kick in the teeth.
Yeah,
to find out that you don't qualify.
Well, I actually think it was for the best, because that led me into trail running, and more specifically trail ultra running. Yeah. So that was my goal. Since I didn't get into Boston, I thought, well, I need to do something, and I'm going to try to do a trail ultra. And that's what I did. And it just, one thing led to another. And, I just kept improving. And I guess we can leave the story off here. Was that good enough of a recap?
Yeah, no, that was perfect. And thank you for doing that. And I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but no. I want you to sort of convey that better than I could. Obviously it's your story as well. So I like the guest to tell the story. And if you are listening now and you didn't hear the podcast, go back and listen, because you can hear that in about, I think it was about an hour and a half's podcast.
Yeah, I think it was.
So yeah, we really got into it. And I was truly amazed and actually inspired. Unfortunately, I got a bit of a twinge in my knee. So after that podcast, I wanted to go running, but I had to kind of hold myself back. I was like, no, we've got to make sure we sort of rehab this right. It seems to be getting better. I've just been for a walk, about a 3-mile walk with my wife earlier today. So it's feeling a bit better. So I'm definitely I'm following you on Strava. I can keep getting those little bits of inspiration from you as I see you cracking on. But what I was really amazed about is that, so this happened at like 50 years old. You said you couldn't even make it round one lap of a track, which was 400 meters?
Yeah, 400-meter track.
Yep. And then to go from that to at the age of 61, was it, when you ran the 100-mile race?
Yeah, actually, the first sort of milestone that I always like to think of came almost exactly 10 years after I discovered my blockage. Was I entered a 6-hour ultra, and I won the race. I was the overall winner. So I had to look back at how far I had come, not being able to run more than a lap to winning an ultra. Now, there were some extenuating circumstances about that particular ultra. So it's not typical for a 60-year-old to win, but it went up into, now I'm talking Fahrenheit. I not really good at converting to centigrade, but it was in the 90s in Fahrenheit that day. And a lot of people dropped out. And, I didn't drop out. So it was sort of survival of the fittest. But anyway, so yeah, that was 60. And then 61, I ran my first 100-mile race. And yeah, I took 6th place overall. Yeah.
That's unbelievable. So did literally everybody drop out apart from you, or was it just all...
it wasn't quite that extreme. No,
not that extenuating.
No.
Well, just to put into perspective for the UK listeners, even 90 Fahrenheit is 32 degrees Celsius over here. So that's mega hot. I mean, I was just in holiday in Turkey and just sunbathing in that for 10 minutes. I had to go and jump in the pool to cool off. So, yeah, running in that heat for 6 hours, I understand why people were dropping off. What made you different?
That's a good question. There is something about my physiology that I seem to do well in heat. I'm a very light sweater. When I run with, we call them buddies, you call them mates, I guess. When I run with my mates.
We use buddy now as well.
Oh, do you? Okay.
Listen, I think, we watch that much American stuff over here with Netflix and everything else. We've picked up a lot of the lingo. We don't just eat biscuits. There's so many things that you'll be surprised about. I think you need to get yourself over here, Rick, and you might be surprised that we're not just there with biscuits, cups of teas, and fish and chips anymore.
It has been.
But yeah, you'll hear it all the time. We use buddy, pal, but yeah, we do. Mate is very British, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's been a while since I've been over there. I think it's the last time I was there was 1999. So wow. Yeah, I'll have to I'll have to make a trip and get more up to date. Sorry, I don't mean.
No, it's okay. No, I like it. It's fun. Don't worry, I'm not offended at all. Don't worry about that. I liked it. I'm just mocking you, really.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's fine. So anyway, what I was going to point out was when I run. It seems like everybody else, we have really brutal summers here. So it's not uncommon to get over 90 degrees. And so anyway, when I run with other people, they're wringing out their shorts. I mean, literally just water is just coming out from the shorts, their shirts, their headbands, and I'll be dry. And in fact, just to give you a little incident, so during this last 50 miler, it didn't get really hot. It only got up to 80 Fahrenheit. But when I crossed the line after the first lap, the race director was there, and he looks at me and he says to this guy next to him, he says, "Dude, look at this guy. He's bone dry." So I had just run 25 miles. And I looked down, and my shirt was completely dry. I don't know. I mean, so I'm well suited. I don't have any African blood in my background. I don't know from a heredity perspective why. I'm mostly German, so I don't know why I adapt well to the heat. But I seem to do. And in fact, the 100 miler also got up to 90 that day, which is normally disaster for a 100 mile race. It's usually disaster when it gets that high. But I don't know. People are losing a lot of fluid, and then that's when you start to cramp and everything else.
people take salt tablets, I believe, in these ultras and stuff as well, because
Yes,
they're losing
yes,
too much sodium. And but
yes.
then at
I
the same
have
time,
cramp.
does that
I
you have
have
cramp?
cramped. Yeah, I have
Mm.
cramp. But I just, as far as a performance drop off, I don't seem to have the drop off a lot of people do when they get in heat. So I don't know. It's a built-in advantage, potentially my genes. I don't know what to tell you. I wish
I'll
I
tell
knew
you,
myself.
you're, you're an anomaly.
Yeah, that's as you say, spot on.
That's gonna stick with you now. That's gonna
Yeah,
stick with you.
yeah.
No, it's a brilliant story. You're like the opposite of Wim Hof, because if you're running in, I don't know if you know of the guy.
Yes, I know him. Yes.
Yeah, so you're total opposite. So you could just carry on in the heat, and he's all about. What does he say, that the cold is the key to life, or something like that, or being cold is the key to life?
Yeah.
He does
Yeah.
some crazy extreme stuff.
I know. I really got into him while I had Lyme disease because I couldn't run. So I needed to do
Okay,
something
so
radical. So
yeah, because he said he's got some kind of breathing technique that can get rid of or reverse certain diseases and stuff like that. And he has something on Lyme disease. Now, I haven't looked into that or heard anything about what he actually said, but I know there was some connection there, which I suppose is a nice segue onto Lyme disease, really. And we can talk now a little bit more about that and what happened there. Is this the right time to talk about that?
sure.
I just don't want to skip too far forward down the timeline. That's all, because I know there's a
Well,
couple of really kind of a couple of moments, like pivotal moments, on this journey that you've been on. So
yeah, I guess we could backtrack a little bit. I just want to state for the record, I did manage to get to the Boston Marathon.
yeah, you've got to get that one out there.
Yeah, I gotta get that in. Yeah, even though I got into trail running, I did go back and see when I turned 60, then I got 15 more minutes. My cutoff went from 340 to 355, but ironically, I ended up running 335 anyway. So
Wow.
I would have gotten in even if it were 340.
Yeah, even if you went in that age category, yeah.
Yeah. So, but the problem I had is, so I ran it in 2016, but that whole spring leading up to the Boston Marathon, I was injured. I was getting into this cycle where I was just getting injured off, just different injuries off and on. And then I actually ran Boston injured. I managed to finish. It was ironically the slowest marathon I've ever run, but but I did get through
So
it.
you had to, yeah. So you did you got in at 3 hours 35, but by the time you actually got to the marathon, you was injured. And what time did you manage to finish that in?
Oh boy, I think it was around 3. Yeah, it was real close to the qualifying time, 3:55. It was like 20 minutes slower than the previous marathon I had run. Yeah, I was, it was
So you're 60 years old, you're injured, and
Yeah.
you're still running marathons in sub 4 hours, and you're
Yeah.
like, oh man, it was terrible.
Well, it's all relative. But to be honest, I was doing it for the experience of it. And so I never planned for that to be a race that I was going to push 100%, because I just wanted to soak it all, the crowds and soak
Yeah.
it all in. And just another kind of thing that was really nice about the race was at the starting line, I lined up beside the guy who was the number 2 runner on our cross country team in high school. So here we were 43 years later, lined up beside each other at the Boston Marathon. I just thought that was an incredible coincidence.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I enjoyed that. I ran with him for the first 8 miles, and he had a bad race too. But anyway, it's
I was just going to ask, did you leave him or did he leave you?
no, he had an even worse race than I did. But the point is, we were there 43 years after we were running mates in high school. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it was a great experience. But then, as you know, I was ready to move on back into the ultra world, and so. I don't know if you want to talk about the 100-milers. I actually did 2 of them in 2017, and they were very much different. But yeah, I don't know how much detail you want to get into. But,
yeah. Well, you know what? I mean, running 100 miles, for a start, it's like, how long did that take?
My first one was 22 hours and 3 minutes. Yeah.
Wow. And how? So you must have a bit of a sleep. You can't run for 22 hours straight. You don't sleep.
There's no sleeping.
Oh my!
Sleeping.
Well, it's 100 miles in 22 hours. Like I couldn't even walk for 3 hours. So I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know how you can do that. Like I know some people have some power naps, but I don't know if these are the like 200-mile races and stuff. You know, there's some crazy races out there in the States that suit these ultra marathons. I know there's some like 200+ mile races, so they must stop and have a bit of a sleep.
Yes, but that's a different story altogether. When those races go, you know, like a lot of participants they're taking 90 hours to do that. And some of it's the terrain too. When you talk about the 200-mile races, they're all in tough terrain, and 2 of them are somewhat at altitude too. So you throw that in. So it's apples and oranges. The course that I ran was relatively flat, other than it started up on top of a bit of a I won't call it a mountain, but it was a pretty high hill that you had to run up and down a few times. But the rest of it was flat. So there was no one sleeping. No, that's not part of a 100-mile race.
So I take it you have to walk at some points.
Yes, absolutely.
Or stop.
Absolutely. Yeah, I had a whole strategy mapped out of how I was going to alternate walking with running. Yeah, only the very best in the world are running the entire. In fact, I would argue even they stop for aid stations, so they're stopping to refuel. And this particular race had excellent aid stations. They were about 5 to 7 miles apart. So you were stopping every 5 to 7 miles and eating and drinking. So there were a lot of stops. I mean, if you calculate how many aid stations that is, it's a lot. So it's not a continual running for 100 miles. It's like I said, only the world's best people can do that. So I was starting out. I was walking about 0.15 mile, and then running 0.85 mile. And but as it progressed, it slowly progressed to the point where I was up to like a quarter mile walk and then 3/4 mile run. So yes, you just keep repeating. And it also
until you get to the end.
How
are you feeling? What's going through your head at these like certain points of that race? There must be times where it's like this is never going to end. You know, how do you keep yourself going?
Well, early on, I was with a lot of other runners, so I was talking. You know, we were just chatting with other runners for a few hours. I was just talking the whole time. And so it's almost like a social thing too.
Yeah.
But there got to a point where I was with this one group, and they were from the state of Ohio, which is where I just ran the 50-mile race. Anyway, one of the guys said mentioned the fact that he ran Leadville 100. Now, Leadville 100 is one of the more difficult 100 milers in the United States. And it's at elevation. The town of Leadville, Colorado is 10,000 feet, and the race starts from that point and goes up. So you can imagine it's a very grueling race. So when I heard that, I thought, my God, what the hell am I doing with this guy? First of all, he was like, he was at least 20 years younger than me. And he had I shouldn't say he just ran it, but he had the experience, and he finished that race. And so at that moment, I realized I needed to slow down. I was running. You were
keeping up with him, and he
You're right. I think that's what it was. I got kind of caught up with, wanting to talk to these guys. And I sort of lost track of the fact that I was moving faster than what I should be. So, I let them go. And then I got into a really good rhythm. And I did hit a bit of a problem at about 40 miles in. My one shoe was rubbing the laces were digging into the top of my foot. And, that's one thing about these distances. You don't always know about how your equipment's going to work, because you're in uncharted territory, when you get out. And so I had never run in these shoes that far before. So anyway, I really lucked out. There was a woman at one of the aid stations who worked in a running shoe store, and she saw what was going on, or, I described the problem to her, and she said, "Hey, I have an idea how to fix it. Do you want me to do it?" I said, "Go ahead." So she relaced my shoe. She came up with this creative pattern to take the pressure off the top of my shoe. And it worked. She saved my race. I am so thankful for
the right place at the right time.
Oh, I know. Yeah, it was. I'm so grateful to her. I never did get her name. I wrote to the race director to make sure that he thanked her for me. But anyway, I just went on, and then I purposely think of positive things. I come up with positive mantras to repeat to myself. And, I never think of anything beyond the current mile, or maybe to the next aid station. Yeah. You just can't let your mind, if you try to think about how far you actually have to go yet, it's too depressing.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
as positive as you can be, I just feel like at some point in a 100-mile race, something's going to try to break you. I mean, you must have a solid mindset to just not let that even enter your head. There's got to be a point where it's like, apart from that one time where you said there, where you was talking to that chap who did the race before in Leadville.
Yeah.
I've never heard you say anything more negative. You're just like, what the hell am I doing with this guy? And then you just decided to slow down. But you just seem like you have this unbreakable will to just keep going. That's what I'm getting from you. I'm like, there's got to be a bit of a horror story where, because when they say people hit the wall in marathons.
Yeah. That's because they didn't fuel properly.
Okay. See? Yeah. So you've never hit a wall?
If you fuel properly and you pace, it's really a combination of both things. You have to pace properly and fuel properly. Well, you also have to drink and make sure your electrolyte levels are correct also. But if you take care of the logistics of keeping your body, the inputs that your body needs, then it's a matter of your mind, really. I'm not that unique. I mean, there's thousands of people that finish 100-mile races every year. I'm not the only one doing it. I mean, what makes my story maybe a little unusual is my age.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But yeah, so yeah, I guess I just like I'm physiologically adapted to the heat. My mind, I guess, is adapted to these sorts of challenges.
Mm,
Yeah, I just sort of it's almost like a meditative state you enter.
yeah.
And in fact, this is going to sound a little far out there, but at one
Let's
point,
go for it.
uh, there were freight trains running along these tracks that were near the trail I was on. And I
Okay.
would just imagine like the power from the freight train because I could feel the reverberation.
Yeah.
That's how close it was. And I would just like try to absorb that
Absorb the
energy.
power. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, you think of creative things. That seemed to help. But I have to say, I did start to. I won't say get down, but I would say I was just mentally tired about mile 60. But the beauty of this race, for me at least, is I had what's called a pacer. You're allowed to
Okay.
have somebody join you.
Right.
In this particular race, it was at mile 60. So it just worked out because that's when I was starting to just get mentally tired, as well as physically too. But it was sort of just getting tired, and but I was like an hour and a half ahead of what I had told him my schedule was going to be. Fortunately, this particular race had live tracking, so he had an app where he was watching me.
Wow.
Yeah,
Technology. That's
yeah.
perfect.
The technology kind of saved. This is another thing that saved me because he took off like much earlier. I didn't. We didn't live that far from this race, like an hour and a half away. So
Yeah.
he ended up getting there, although he just got there as I came up. And so he had to throw his shoes on real quick, and but we went.
Straight in.
And
Was this a friend of yours?
yes, yeah, he was a guy I met at the race that I won, and
Okay.
he was sort of instrumental. He had a big part in that race. I won't go into all the details. I'll just say that he helped me out in that race because he could kind of tell what place I was in, and he would kept shouting at me that I was going to win. And I wasn't convinced that I was going to win. And he kept saying, "Man, you've got this." You kept screaming it at me. And so he got me pumped up. So anyway, I thought he'd make a great pacer,
Yeah.
which turned
Pacer
out.
and a hype man. I love a
Oh,
good
yeah.
hype man. You got this.
He did not disappoint. He did not disappoint. He was great because so he joined me, and immediately I get this psychological boost because
Mm,
now I had not been running with anybody for many miles leading up to mile 60. So being by yourself is tough. So being with him and being able to talk, and it was great. And so he got this idea. It was now dark, and he got this idea because there was a turnaround spot. He said, "Hey, we're going to be able to see the runners who are ahead of you because they're going to be coming towards us." Which,
yeah.
I thought, yeah, that makes sense. He said, "We'll be able to tell how far ahead you are behind you are." And so we go and we see some headlights, and he's calculating. My mind's kind of fried at this point. I can't do math. So he calculated. He's there. There were only three. Wait, how many? Three? Yeah, three. There were three runners. So he convinces me I'm in fourth place, and I'm only 40 minutes behind, which in a 100-miler is doable. I mean, you could make up 40 minutes, and he's now telling me you've got this, man. He's convincing me that I have a shot at winning the 100-mile race. And he got me going. Like I got a shot of adrenaline. He had me convinced. Well, there was kind of a hole in his theory, though, because we didn't notice that there were two people that passed us in the daylight. They snuck by us in the daylight. So that's why I ended up in sixth place, because the people, the first two runners, were so far ahead that they passed us in the daylight. Yeah, the person that won it was a woman. She flew in from California to set the American 100-mile race for women, and she didn't get it because of the heat. The heat did her in, but she still won.
What was her name?
I don't remember. You can look it up on Ultra Sign Up. Go to my link. Go to it was called the C&O Canal 100 race, and then if you click on that race, it'll take you to the results for that year. And
I only know one female ultra runner, and it probably wasn't her. But is that Courtney DeWalter who won the long? Yeah, it was a really big one, wasn't it, that she won.
But, was not her, but
it could be something with the theory, though. With the women, could be like yourself, because women seem to not sweat as much as well. Maybe that's giving them a bit.
I don't know, but so he was a great pacer. He got me. So there you have it. I mean, I although he did have to drop out at mile 90. He writes shoe reviews. Actually, I think he writes for a British site. I think it's British. It's shoeguru.com.
Okay.
Yeah. So they give him all these shoes, to try out. Well, he was trying out these shoes, and they had really bothered him after 30. He ran 30 miles with me, and they were really starting to bother his feet. So he dropped out. At 2 a.m. in this teeny little town in the middle of the state of Maryland. He got an Uber. He told me he got an Uber in 15 minutes to the finish line. So he was waiting there. Yeah. So I had to run the last 10 miles by myself. And when I finished, it was the most, compared to Boston, where there's tens of thousands of people, there were two people at the finish line.
Massively anticlimactic after running 100 miles.
I know. There was Sean.
You want to bring the band out.
It was Sean and the race director. And that was it. That was my crowd.
So you placed sixth out of how many people?
Well, I know that there were 150 registered, but I don't think, I'm pretty sure all 150 didn't show up on race day. And then there's the people that drop out. So,
that doesn't matter.
No, I guess, I'm going to guess maybe a little over 100 people. Yeah, so it's not a big race. It's not a big race.
But that's really good going, though. You play it down a lot. That's really good going.
Yeah, it's well, I was thrilled because there was a write-up of the race in Ultra Running magazine, and the author highlighted a couple performances, and he chose me as one of them. So I was thrilled about that. Just a little blurb, about, hey, this old guy just ran the first marathon.
Yeah, that's great, though, because at least it was worth it after two people being at the finish line. At least you got a write-up, Somebody cared.
Yeah, at least I got a couple sentences in an obscure magazine that I don't know how many people read it. But anyway, I was thrilled. And so the second 100 miler did not go off as smoothly as that at all. Part of the problem was that Sean, my pacer, was actually in my second, so he couldn't pay. I didn't have a pacer for my second.
Right, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so that was a whole different, see, that gets more into, what you were alluding to is just the mental aspect is even tougher when you don't have a pacer. Yeah, it's Yeah. So anyway, I won't go into the great details of that, but I did
Yeah.
manage to break 24 hours, but I was about an hour and 20 minutes slower than my first one. But
Still blows
yeah,
my mind to think that you're running for a whole day. Even though you stop and you have a little bit of a walk and stuff, it still
yeah.
blows my mind.
I
But
tell I tell people it's like a moving picnic. It's just it's a 24-hour moving picnic. That's all it is.
okay, that's a good way of putting it. I mean, I like food, so maybe if they put the right food out, I could probably make,
Yeah,
maybe
some
20,
good food.
maybe do a marathon on that if they put their aid stations on. But what I
Yeah,
wanted to get to is actually what you said was the preparation. It
yeah,
sounds that preparation is key, and it's that
yeah,
old cliche, isn't it? So if
yeah.
you can give us some pointers on that preparation, I think my friend Gary, who's preparing for a 50K, I think
Hmm.
he'll really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And anybody else who wants to start running these crazy distances, maybe one day I'll pick up running again, and it's something that I might try and go for. But for now, I'm trying to stick with my 10Ks and stuff like that. But yeah, just definitely want to hear a little bit about preparation, and you was talking about fueling as well, which was important. So,
Yeah.
how do you prepare for such a long
Well,
race?
before I answer that question, I just want to say real quickly, when I was your age, I
Mm.
wasn't running race. It takes a lot of time. Let's face it. I mean, it takes a big devotion of time, and in your stage of your life with kids, it's. I mean, there are people that do it, but I'm just saying, I didn't. I wasn't doing it, so I didn't start doing this stuff until my mid 50s. So
Mm.
it takes it.
There's hope for me yet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it takes. You have to have a lot of time. So, well, obviously, one of the most important aspects is training. You've got to come up with a training plan. Training plans are difficult to follow exactly, but you have to have some sort of basis for your
Yeah, of
training. I
course.
mean, yeah, you have to be grounded to some degree in reality. You can't just expect to run ultras without putting in some decent amount of miles. So,
Yeah,
I mean, the general pattern of these plans are, you're going to end up doing one long run a week, and then some of the plans will have you doing two long runs back to back. So most
mm.
people are working, so that means doing these on the weekends, and
Yeah,
so again, you have to have that availability in
sure.
time availability. So as far as the other thing is, you have to practice using everything that you're going to use in the race. Like if you're going to run with a certain running vest, or even your clothes, because the last thing you want to do is try something or wear something you've never worn before, because you get chafing is a big issue. So
Yeah,
you have to know ahead of time that what you have on, everything that you have with you, you've already tested it in these long runs. So that's one thing I would say.
yeah, that's
Uh,
it. Things like that would just slip your mind. I could imagine that you wouldn't even think, oh, better. I suppose it's a dress rehearsal.
yeah, it is. It's
Mm.
just the smallest things can do you in. I mean, if you get a bad blister, so obviously you have to be wearing the shoes you're going to run in the race. So you have to know whether you're prone to blisters in that shoe or the socks. I mean, everything has to be tested as much as you can. I mean, but that's one of the challenges of 100 miles, is because you're not running that distance in training. You don't know for sure. There's always an element of risk, but anyway, and then you have to practice other things like your fueling. You have to know your body and how many calories per hour you're going to need to consume, and then you're going to need to know what types of foods your stomach tolerates.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of experimentation with foods, and you practice these things, and so ahead.
So there's a lot of trial and error there.
Yes.
And when you say putting the right food in your body, you mean putting the right food in your body for when you're running as well? Because I suppose you could, what you can eat that doesn't upset your stomach, but it's a whole different thing when you're actually out there running.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I'm talking about while you're running. Yeah. Yeah. Because, your body prioritizes sending its resources to cool you, and it tends to shut down the digestive system. And so you have to know what you can get away with when your digestive system starts to get taxed. Yeah, so that's the number one. Actually, dietary or upset stomach is the number one reason for people to drop out of ultras.
Is it?
Yeah, that's the number one reason. It's very common, especially in hotter races, because it becomes even people's stomachs their digestion just shuts down completely, and then they get sick. So you're testing your fluid intake and your electrolyte intake. So there's all that, and then there's the whole preparation for the event itself. That's a whole. You have to plan, as I sort of alluded to when I was talking about the 50-mile race. Just knowing what you're going to have in each of these, what they're called drop bags. Like, are you going to have another pair of shoes in case, you're having difficulties with your current shoes, and have a change of clothes, and, it's just a lot of planning that goes into it.
Yeah. And do you have like a map of the race that you're going to do? So do you actually like plan for certain points? So do you know where your stops are going to be, or that? Because I remember you saying on the last podcast that if it gets to a sort of quite a bit of an incline or something, you just walk up it, sort of hike it rather than run it.
Yeah, that's the other thing. You sort of have to have a strategy of when you're going to walk and or hike. And generally you hike if the terrain is such that the hills are fairly big. It makes more sense to hike the hills. Give your running muscles a break. Hike the hills because you're not going to be able to run it much faster than you can hike it anyway. So you have to. Yes, you do study the course ahead of time. In fact, that's one thing that's burned me is I go into some races and I don't have a true appreciation for the course. That's one of the things that happened to me in the second 100 miler. I truly didn't have a full appreciation for that course. So it's good to study it and know how much distance there is between each aid station, because they might slip it. These access points for these aid stations vary and depending on the terrain. So one of them might be like 12 miles and then the next one might be 4. So you had to know that to know, well, if it's 12 miles, I need to carry more in my vest or my waist pack or whatever to get me to the next aid station. But if it's only 4, then I can get away with a lot less.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. And when you was talking about fueling and things like that, and calories, is there any kind of method to work out like how much you should be putting in your body at certain times of a race, or is it all just really trial and error? And it's because I suppose everybody's different, but I know when we talked on the last podcast, we kind of picked up on that Maffetone method for training when it was it's 180 minus your age is what you should be running at to train your aerobic system. Is there a way of kind of working out how many calories that you're burning? So how much calories you should be putting back in your body? Is that something that you can do? Is there somewhere how you can check that? Or I'm just really trying to get as much information out of you, seeing as you're a pro. to be able to pass on to the listeners who are,
Yeah.
and I'm not even talking about running 100 milers. I know a lot of
Yeah.
people preparing for marathons and things like that.
Well, most people have like 90 minutes of carbs stored in their body, in their muscles, in their liver. So most people could probably run 90 minutes without refueling. You can argue that it might be worth starting a little earlier than that. But in an ultra, let's just say a 50K, okay? So there's a range for most people. It's going to range between 150 calories to 300 calories per hour, depending on the person. And depending on your digestive system also, how much you can handle. That's another variable. But through trial and error, I determined that I can handle about 200 calories per hour. And obviously, the weather conditions and things like that can change it. But let's just go by general guidelines. So I will carry these gels with me that have 100 calories in them. So I get a lot of my calorie supply through the gels. But the problem with the gels is after a while, I can only eat so many gels. They get to the point where they're just sickening sweet, and you just can't take any more. Some people.
I've tried some of those gels myself.
Yeah, I got the most I ever took in a race was 16 gels, which that's a lot of gels.
Yeah.
But anyway, so what I do is I take one right before the race, just to sort of top off my carb supplies, just to make sure. And then I'll start about an hour. I'll start ahead of time. Because it takes a little while till it's absorbed into your body. So let's say 15 minutes till what you eat. So I'll start about an hour. I'll eat another one, and then it's sort of you're playing it by ear because when you get to the aid stations, they're going to have different foods. Now I know that I can eat a lot of them have peanut butter and jelly.
Nice
sandwiches, but they're sliced up into little bite-sized pieces. That seems to be a universal food, and I know I do well on that. So I start eating peanut butter and jelly, and but you as a runner have to know what you like, and it's nice to know ahead of time what they're going to have at the aid station.
Yeah, because bread could sit quite heavy on you as well, so. I wouldn't mind having like a scoop of peanut butter and just like on a spoon and just taking that and running on that.
Well, ordinarily I wouldn't eat these peanut butter because it's just like Wonder Bread. It's just white bread. But your body needs that simple carbohydrate as fast as it can. So it's a little different circumstances. Comparing that to your everyday life. Another thing I never do in my everyday life is I never drink Coca-Cola, but I do in races.
Yeah. Well, you get that sugar straight in you, and I suppose it's not just sugar, is it? It's like there's like a syrup.
Oh, it's a magic combination of sugar, caffeine, and carbonation. It's you can't imagine how wonderful.
It's also great for when you've got a hangover. That's my go-to. If I've had a bit of a heavy night, I go for the Coca-Cola. It just softens the blow.
Well, once you start training for ultra, you can't be having these.
You can't be drinking.
You're gonna have to give those binges up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not committing to training for ultras. I will just put that on record.
Yeah, I never tried that. I usually just go for, not that I'm hungover that often, but I drink. Have you ever heard of Noon? It's an electrolyte. No. It's an electrolyte tablet.
Okay.
Yeah. I like the caffeinated ones.
Right.
Yeah. So
and you take that when you're hungover?
Yeah.
or when you've had it? Okay.
Not that I'm hungover. When I've had one too many. Let's put it that
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. I wasn't sure actually when you won that. Well, that last race, the Tuscazor, or
Yeah.
however you pronounce it,
Yeah. Yeah. However.
whether you had a bottle of syrup or whiskey at the end there. But I seen a
Uh,
comment on Strava, and it was syrup.
yeah. Unfortunately, it was syrup.
Is that
Yeah.
normal, or is that just one of those things because it's made in that state or something?
Yeah. I don't even think Ohio is known for syrup. That's more Vermont
Canada.
or Canada. Yeah, I don't
Mm.
know why they picked that. These races they all try to have some kind of unique award. So I have a collection of like German weather houses and railroad spikes, and now I have syrup. Makes a nice addition.
Do you just put them into some kind of trophy cabinet, or keep them in a certain area of your house, or do you,
I have
do
a
you
couple
actually eat the
shelves.
syrup?
No, I haven't resorted to that. Yeah, I have a couple shelves I throw stuff on, and I have a thing for ribbons. I just hang them. I don't do anything with the numbers. I don't.
Mm.
Some people do that. They'll make something nice, frame their number, and that I don't do that. But anyway.
Fair enough.
So, yeah, I don't know if I covered enough of the preparation. Oh, one other thing about preparation is you really need to come up with your own positive mantras. For one thing, for when things get tough, and they will get tough. There's no doubt about. At some point, you're going to need something to repeat to yourself, just over and over. You need to have that available, and it has to resonate with you. So I can't give you mine because that might not resonate with you, and just go into it with this mindset that you're just going to be positive. Smile, even if you have to fake it. Smile. There's something in the act of smiling.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so you smile, you thank the aid workers, you just keep everything positive and hope for the best. and then I'll end it on that note for preparation, because I know our time's getting on here.
Yeah, no, we're getting carried away again. But what I did want to talk about actually was diet. And this isn't, I'm not asking you for your diet advice. What I'm really interested in is that choice to go vegan and how that felt for you. Now, there's like people at both sides of the spectrum, and then there's just the regular people in the middle, I suppose. But so I know there's a lot of people who are just on these kind of caveman carnivore diets who say that's great, and then you've got vegans who are not eating anything that's other than plant based. So it's not even just meats; it's your dairies and everything else. So I want to know, one, what made you go vegan, and two, how did that work for you? And three, are you still vegan? Because I know you said it was like a vegan diet that you'd started to do, but then you didn't really say whether you still are or not. So let's start with number one. What made you do that?
Okay. Well, I believe I mentioned that I was following a program written by a cardiologist named Dean Ornish, and that was his program. And the vegans have studies that they quote, and the paleo people have their studies. But I needed to pick something. I needed to do something radical. And everything I read about his approach made sense to me. And it wasn't just diet. So, I mean, that was only one leg of the stool, so to speak. And so I initially started out that way. And I will tell you that I struggled. I struggled with it. In fact, it wasn't too long after I started that I sort of evolved into a diet that was more pescatarian, meaning that I would eat fish and seafood. which obviously is not vegan. But I don't know. I mean, you have to know what you're doing on a vegan
Yeah.
diet. I'm not saying it can't be done, because there's a lot of examples of it. One of the most famous vegan ultra runners, and he's in the U.S., is Scott Jurek. This
Yeah.
guy won the most famous 100-mile race in the U.S. He won it like 7 years in a row, and he's a vegan. But his
And
wife,
Rich Rolls went vegan as well, didn't he?
Rich Roll,
Yeah.
did you say? Yes, vegan.
Yeah.
That's another example. But Scott Jurek's wife is a vegan cook. I mean,
Yes.
she
that always helps.
Yeah, I mean, I was divorced. I was on my own. Not initially, but eventually I was. But so I didn't have the knowledge base that he has access to. I mean, I could go into all kinds of things, but there's a lot of vitamins that you don't get on that diet, and so you have to supplement.
Yeah.
So you need to know what you're doing. So I didn't do that well, but I was still eating a lot of plants. I mean, this salad was like the mainstay of my diet. I was eating tons of salads and vegetables, and so
especially with being a runner, you're going to have to just eat, because there's just not a lot of calories that you need to get in. I mean, I suppose you could still eat rice and stuff, but if you're eating salad, you're going to have to be putting a lot of salad away to get the right amount of calories.
Yeah, it takes a long time to eat an enormous salad. First of all, it takes a long time to make it, and then it takes forever to eat it. You're right, because
I'm with you on the vegan thing, though. I tried it myself. I watched Game Changers.
Yeah.
Which you've probably heard of. You must have heard of. It was so big. And I thought, you know what? If this is true, then I've got to give it a go. And I did it for 3 weeks. And now, as you know, I've got 2 kids. My wife sort of half did it with me, so we should have some vegan nights. So I was pretty much doing it on my own. And the kids would have, they don't always eat the same as what we eat because they can be fussy. So there's like 3 different meal preparations going on an evening, and it was so tough. And as you said, it's like finding recipes and stuff that suits you and stuff that you can actually enjoy. I really struggled myself with that, and so I did it for 3 weeks. And then somebody said to me, "How do you feel? Do you feel better?" And I said, "No, I feel exactly the same. I've just been stressed every night cooking, trying to find different things to cook and everything else." So, and then I sort of went down that route where I started eating fish and stuff again, and eventually I've just gone back to a normal diet, I suppose, where I eat a bit of everything. So, leading into what you were saying, so you sort of you picked up and eating fish a bit more, a pescatarian diet.
Yes.
And then I suppose introduced, is that still no dairy, or is that dairy as well?
That's a good question. I don't know. Technically, I was not eating dairy except at, like a birthday party. I would have a little bit of ice cream. But other than that, I wasn't eating dairy, but I don't know from a technical perspective whether that's allowed in that diet. There's so many different combinations. Some of them you're allowed to have eggs, and another one you're not, and the same with dairy. And then some people avoid grains, and so my diet has sort of evolved over time. I got to the point where it was sort of frustrating reading all these claims. Oh, and by the way, I tried paleo at one time just to try it, and that I struggled with that too.
So paleo, what is that? Just meat? No,
it's from what I remember. This is a few years back. Would have been back like 2015. But it's more restricting your carb intake.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So I know.
And no grains. And you're I think they shoot for less than 50 grams of
Yeah, I've tried that
carbs
stuff
per
as well.
day. Yeah, I couldn't keep the weight on. I mean, I was losing more weight than I wanted to. I mean,
Yeah.
I was already thin, and then when I started this, it was not good. I
So it's
was way too.
basically a keto diet. That's what I called it anyway. So it's like
Yeah,
literally
I
carbs.
have to confess, I confuse keto and paleo a lot. I'm not.
Again, it's probably very similar, but there's just a little bit of difference with something. Yeah, like the same way with the fish, and you can eat dairy and you can't eat dairy. Yeah, these diets are funny like that. But yeah, no, definitely
Yeah,
that keto diet that hurt me. I lost a good bit of weight, but it
yeah,
was tough, and I was weak because I was
yeah.
boxing whilst I was doing that.
Oh, you're boxing.
And
Okay.
I could even put out, I could see it
Yeah,
like my power output was terrible, hitting the
yeah,
bags, and I was so weak from it. Yeah, I looked better. I was slimmer, but I didn't feel
yeah,
better at all. So
yeah.
that wasn't the one for me.
Yeah. So I kind of had a revelation was, I was getting sick of all these sort of conflicts and battles between all the different diet factions. And so I came upon this article about the blue zones. Have you ever heard of the blue zones?
No, I haven't.
Okay. The blue zones are the locations in the world where there's a preponderance of people that live over
Yes, I
100 years
have.
old. Okay.
So
Oh,
you're gonna
now you
say,
remember
yeah,
it.
yeah, Sicily is the
I think that's one of them. Yes.
I think that's the. So basically, the people
The
who live
longest
the longest
lifespan.
in lifespan. Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, I did hear this. It was quite recent, but yeah, you carry on.
Yeah. So, I mean, the way I looked at it was, well, here's the proof. Like, you could do all these arguments back and forth, but these areas are proving out their diet and that it works. So, there's a certain author that wrote a book called The Blue Zones. I think his name is Dan Buettner. I think it is. Anyway, he found the commonality among all these different areas around the world. And so that makes more sense to me is like, well, here's these areas of the world that have proven their diet is healthy, although it's not entirely diet because most of these populations are very active as well. And they also have very close social ties. They take care of their elderly. So it's not 100% diet, but the commonality is they eat predominantly plants. I mean, as a percent of their total caloric intake, most of it is plants.
Okay.
But they are eating grains. They do eat fish. They use oils like olive oil is a common oil that's used in the cooking and on salad. And they do eat different types of meat, but the difference is they're just eating meat more as a condiment, or they'll eat it during celebrations. So it's not every day. It's more sporadic in their intake, and so it's not as critical to. Or it's not, like I said, as a percentage of their total calories, it's not a huge portion.
Yeah.
So that is kind of what I follow. I sort of try to follow that. I know it's sort of vague in a way, and maybe if I didn't actually read the book. I just read articles on the internet, but I think that seems to make sense to me. And they eat eggs also. So, I eat
That's
all
good.
those
I eat
things.
a lot of eggs.
Yeah.
No, I got it wrong. I said Sicily. I meant Sardinia. So that was it. I was watching the reason why I remember, and I only heard about it recently because it was on a Netflix documentary with Zac Efron.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, but yeah, really good documentary, and they were talking about it on there. So that's basically. So what would you call this then? The Blue Zone diet.
yeah, yeah. I think
I'm gonna
that's
have to look that up. And
yeah.
it's
Look
true what
that
you're
up.
saying. It
Yeah,
makes a lot of sense if
yeah,
people are living longer.
yeah,
Obviously activity is important. It's important that we all exercise and everything else.
yeah.
So that's interesting because I thought you was vegan. So I was like, all right, I'm interested to hear this vegan argument, but you're not. So I'm with you.
Uh,
So I'm not going to go back. I'm trying to eat more balanced at the minute anyway. So I'm not eating as much meat, really limited red meat, and I'm eating some kind of just plant based meals, some meals which are just beans, grains, things like that. So I think
yeah,
that's important. I think ultimately it is balance, isn't it? And that's been said for a number of years. But we're all looking for this this ultimate, this best diet. This I don't know. I suppose at the same time as well, we're all doing different things, and we're all doing different activity. Where some of us are runners, some of us lift weights, some of us do nothing. So again, it's one of those things where you need to look at it and be like, well, I have to look at my life as a whole, and then really put my diet around that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, certainly diet is very critical, but how you manage stress is important. Your social connections are important. Yeah, obviously, we just talked about exercise is important. So, yeah, it's the totality. Oh, and also sleep is critical.
Yeah.
It's the totality of all those aspects that will enable you to be healthy. Yeah.
Well, it's working for you. It's working for you, definitely. I wanted to say I've got a question from a friend of mine, actually, and spoke, on the intro, basically, Beast and Bulk Nutrition. A friend of mine owns that business. They're a
Mm-hmm.
supplement business. They're
Mm-hmm.
not in the joint business. So he was actually really interested and spoke to me after he listened to the last podcast about asking you, what do you supplement with for your joints? Because it's widely known that running is not good on your joints, good on your knees and things like that. Or at least they say that.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Okay.
Obviously, yeah, I don't agree with it. There's studies that
Well,
show
I can
that.
understand why you wouldn't.
Well, it's what's more critical to your knees is your weight. It isn't whether you run or not. There's studies that show that running is actually beneficial to your knees if you are the right weight, your optimal weight, and you're running with a good form, and you're varying your running surfaces. You do all those things, it can actually be a net positive for your knees. Now, that's obviously I'm a little biased, but I hear that.
Yeah, and I wasn't saying that in a derogatory way, but what I'm saying is that you're 64 years old and you're still running ultra marathons. So
yeah.
if anybody was going to get bad knees or bad joints, you would think that would be you. And obviously you're not, because you're still going. But is there anything you do supplement with?
Okay. Well, this is an interesting question. I have recently, I would say in the last 2 months or so, started taking some supplements I haven't taken before on the advice of a horse nutritionist.
Wow. Okay.
The horse, when you think about it, horses, they're out running, and they have joint issues, and they they have a lot of stresses, and because they're worked out all the time and so forth, and so she specializes in horse nutrition. And these supplements, by the way, are not horse specific supplements. They're sold to humans also, but I had never heard of this combination before. There's a supplement called Celadrin. Don't make me spell it. I think
No,
it's Celedrin, I believe. Celedrin. That's one. And then there's another one that comes in a liquid form. It's called silica. I take those two, and then I take curcumin, which is the primary ingredient in turmeric. So curcumin's an anti-inflammatory. Silica, I get these mixed up sometimes. Silica helps the synovial fluid, and I believe it's celedrin that regenerates tissue. Yeah, so it's sort of a three-prong approach that she had. So I have been doing that for 2 months, and I don't know that it's a radical difference, but she indicated this is something you have to take for months and months before you really feel the benefits of it.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I've been upping my mileage and I've been racing more, and I have not had any joint issues other than some lingering joint issue that came about as a result of having Lyme disease, but it has nothing to do with running. And I know you wanted to cover that, but I sort of took you down a different path. So
can't believe where the time went again. I know.
I apologize for that.
It's not your fault. It's one of those things like you get chatting, and this is why podcasts are great, because you don't actually really know. You can kind of build a structure, but you don't really know where you're going to end up. It's two people having a conversation, and before you know it, you can end up on a path that you never even expected. So don't worry about that at all. I'm really interested in those supplements there, though, because I have always had, and my wife as well, issues with our knees.
Yeah.
So with us exercising and stuff, and it's personally anyway, I'm probably going to try. I've just had a look. I've actually looked it up while you were talking about. I was looking at the celedrin. So it's something that I'll definitely be looking into as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah. She swears that it helps the horses, and
yeah, well, when you think about horses, like they're huge animals, but they've only got small legs, really. Like their joints, like the knees and stuff. So, yeah, it does make a lot of sense.
I mean, I'm sure there's physiological differences between horses and humans, but I'm sure some of the same principles apply. And so, anyway, that was probably the most radical supplements I take. The other stuff I take, I take fish oil, omega-3.
Yeah.
I take vitamin D just because I've had my D levels tested and they're on the low side. So I want to keep my D levels up. That's a critical level. You want to maintain your vitamin D levels for your immune system. In fact, it comes up. You read a lot of articles related to COVID and the link between vitamin D and COVID.
Yeah, I've heard that quite recently as well. I think it was Dr. Ron Patrick actually on Joe Rogan podcast. She was really talking about that.
Yeah, she's really good. She's really thorough. I'm trying to think of some other things.
I mean, you are an anomaly, so it is just, we're all looking at. We're going to be listening to this podcast and thinking, how can we be more like Rick? And this is why I'm just trying to take as much information as possible. But no, honestly, it's just good to get a different outlook and perspective. Because you're out there doing it as well. So
yeah, I will throw one plug in though for something that's not really a supplement, but I think it's a critical piece of the puzzle is strength and mobility. I was injured quite a bit, as I mentioned about the Boston Marathon and so forth. Right after the Boston Marathon, I worked with this guy called a functional movement specialist. And based on the tests, I went through these movement tests, and then based on the results of that, he designed a strength and mobility program. And that has made a tremendous difference, because if you think about it, running requires a certain range of motion. you have to have that range of motion, and you have to have a certain level of strength. So it makes sense. In other words, you need the infrastructure to be able to put your body under those immense stresses. And if you don't have the infrastructure, you're just going to break down. And that's what I was doing. I was just breaking down. And, I worked for many years in an office job where I was sitting, and, I just didn't have the requisite strength and mobility. And since I have that has made, to me, that's more critical than supplements. Supplements certainly can be helpful. Don't get me wrong, but you have to have the right infrastructure to be able to do that. Now, when you're younger, you have a more natural, you sort of have it based on your youth, but as you get older, it becomes even more important. So I just wanted to get that plug in there because I think it's so important, especially as you age, because you're losing muscle mass, and that's up to me. That's the part of the magic sauce that enables me to do.
That was one of the things that actually, changed, the way that you were running, the way you were going forward, because you wasn't picking up these injuries the same way you was prior to actually doing that strength.
Yeah. I had a 2-year span where I had no injuries, and then I got hit with Lyme. But now I'm coming back from Lyme, and I'm avoiding injuries again because I'm back in the program now. So it's working again. So, I think it's very important. But it takes time. That's another investment of time, because I go twice a week, and each session's an hour and a half. So and I drive a half hour to the place. So, that's a lot of time.
Yeah, it does.
But I'm retired, so I can do it.
Works perfect. Yeah. Right. Excellent.
I see we're getting up there in time.
I was looking at the time. I was like, but I noticed you covered off the fact that you had the Lyme there as well, which is something to cover. But again, it's just kind of shot by us. I'm sure we'll catch up again in the future. I'm going to keep following you on Strava. I put the link to your Strava and the other link that you gave me as well. I'll put that in the show notes for the last podcast, but I'll also put it onto this one again. Listen, Rick, thank you very much for coming in and doing this again. It's a pleasure to have you on. Your knowledge is power, and all the guys that are out there running, I'm sure they could take a lot of inspiration when they hear your story.
Well, thanks, Richard. It's been great being on your podcast. I actually enjoy doing these podcasts, so thanks again.
No worries. And actually, before you go, that's one thing that I was going to say, because after we did the last podcast, we was emailing back and forth, and you said that you want to do your own podcast, or you're interested in getting into it. I wholeheartedly recommend that you do that. I think you'd be great. You're never short of words, and there's I'm sure
you're saying I'm a bullshitter.
That you could talk. I talk a lot, and you could talk, Rick. So it must be the name. But no, I think definitely you should get into it, because I think you've got a niche there as well. You've got a good following on your Strava, and I'm sure there's a lot of people out there running, and they want to happily come on. I'm sure you're making plenty of contacts, and I can imagine there's a lot of stories to be told.
Thanks. My idea was, I'm just one story. There are so many stories out there of people who have overcome health problems and just different challenges in their lives. And that's what I wanted to do, is to bring these people on and have them explain how they overcame their problems, and sort of just inform and inspire. And, hopefully that'll help other people who might have a similar situation in their life. So, it's an idea I'm tossing around. I need to act on it, though, and maybe you'll help me out.
Yeah, definitely. You know where I am. You've got my email address. Anything you need to know, I'm here, and I'll be listening. Once you get it up there and it's out and everything else, I'll be listening to it 100%.
Okay, great.
Okay, well, you take care, and I will speak to you in the near future. I'm pretty sure that we'll pick up again at some point, especially if I start training for my ultras.
Definitely. Stay in touch. Stay in touch.